Mhm.
Hello.
Hello, how's
Hello,
things?
hello.
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I was making sure that everything was ready this right up to this morning. Actually, it's I've been just chugging along with these slides for the last week or so.
I mean,
Love
that's
A
Josh.
what
little
happened.
bit deadline.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
no, Josh's presentation was really fascinating.
Yeah.
So that was great. I will say you own a t-shirt company. That's right.
Actually, I'm wearing one. Have
I
you
You're
did
already?
wearing
notice
one.
that. I'm
Yes.
not wearing one, but maybe
Shout out
tomorrow.
Alexi if you're watching. I assume you are. Can I have a medium-sized t-shirt, please? No, I'm kidding. We're giving him shit about that at Crikey the entire time. Fucking hated me.
In his
All right,
mouth.
so
Sucks to be you.
something. It sucks to be. I mean, he offered, right? It's his fault. So I think this is going to be a really fascinating presentation. So Matt's going to be talking about what do you actually need to authenticate something to prove your identity. So take it away, Matt.
Cheers, thanks. Okay, so for those who don't know me, I'm the Volcus guy without the dog. So the company's named after a dog, and that's the dog, Volk. I'm the one that doesn't have Volk. I can see the disappointment in everyone's eyes when I mention it. So yeah, here's the dog tax anyway. I would like to begin this presentation with a bit of a story. A long, long time ago, I was doing this penetration test for a gym. And they had their user profile page. It was like user.php, ID equals 15. Great, I could change the ID to something else. Let's try that. Change it to 1. Name equals admin. Brilliant. And so I want actual permanent access to this account. Okay, I can't change the password to log in because it requires a current password. But I noticed I could change the email address. So I tried that, and you go, okay, you've got to change the email address. Why don't I use the forgotten password? Let's see how that goes. And yeah, I got access to the account. Now, for a lot of you there, you're probably listening to this going, this story is not very interesting. Like, it's just an IDOR with a really old technique of changing an email address and using forgotten password to get access to the account. You're probably not learning anything new. But it was kind of, I don't know why, it popped up in my mind. And it kind of got me thinking, bouncing around in my mind. Did this company, this gym, did they consider email as an authentication token here? Like, this is an old trick using the forgotten password with email. And for this application, email was as much of an authentication token as a password could be. And it got me thinking, what if I went into one of their branches? What if I went to the receptionist that had the dull eyes because she was bored out of her mind? And I went, hey, I really love your newsletter. I wait every month, just ticking down the days, just waiting for your newsletter to come in. It just has so many good tips on working out and all of that, but I haven't been getting it. Have you updated my email address to my latest one? Would they then go, wait, your email address is actually an authentication token because you can use it to go through a forgotten password page and get access to the account? Would they treat email here as an authentication token? And I realized that the registered email address for so many applications is like that. But what if I go a bit further? What if I start looking, start going there? Now, this kind of conversation where you start looking at how do companies actually authenticate is not just theoretical, because this happened a long time ago with Xbox Live. So what happened is people would call into the help desk and say, hey, I'm this gamer tag. And then just ask the help desk to get the name or ask the help desk to make sure that the phone number was correct. And then after they got that little piece of information, they'll ring in again and maybe use that information to get the address or update the address. And then go in and ring again and use the information they've collected to get more stuff. And finally, once they've got enough information, they can basically fill in through the help desk protocols their forgotten password process and get access to the Xbox Live user account. I know this is not really a social engineering attack as such, because in this case, all you're doing is you're looking at their policies as a bit of an instruction sheet, which you can then manipulate. That's kind of more like a hack than a social engineering attack. See, the problem here is one of scale, because when you've got a large user base, people lose passwords, people change emails, they change phones, they go away on holiday, they get their accounts hacked, they get their phones stolen, they get married, they die. And for help desks, especially help desks who have to remotely authenticate, with a large user base, all of these things happen constantly every day. So they've got to be able to cope. And often they just have to do what they have to do to give the users access against their account. And especially for a large scale organization that has a lot of different channels that users use to get access to their data, get access to their accounts or the functions that the organization provides, well, they've got to cope with a lot of different ways that people might want to get access to that account. Imagine a bank, for instance. They have phone banking, they have internet banking, you can go into the bank itself. They've got to have ways of authenticating user in all of these channels. And so I'd start to make a list of questions you kind of have to ask yourself when it comes to all of these authentication factors. Like, how is a username provided or defined? How can one of these factors be changed? Like, how can a mobile phone or email be changed? What happens if it's lost or stolen? Can it be substituted or disabled? Can ownership of, for instance, a mobile phone be transferred, or ownership of an account be transferred? What about other communication channels? What about in person? What happens when someone dies or has power of attorney? Law enforcement as well, of course. And so down the rabbit hole you go. How about if I go back a second? How about for the bank, let's try going the other direction. Could I potentially log in to an account with a driver's license or a passport? What about flipping? What about just going and saying, hey, could I log into these gyms accounts with a driver's license? Could I go in, show my driver's license, get access to the account? Because ultimately, you don't want to, especially for an attacker, they're not going to try and attack the door. They're trying to find the open window that you can just go in. The easiest way to authenticate for an attacker is the way they should be authenticating to a user account. I wanted to explore this, and in doing so, I kind of wanted to go through the layers of authentication. Like, take that email idea. How would they look to change the email address in person or through a help desk? And for this, I wanted a visual way of displaying requirements for authentication, something like a diagram. Now, I tried looking for a diagram. I tried looking for a good way of doing this. Maybe my Google Foo or DuckDuckGoing kind of just failed. I looked through IDP kind of stuff and didn't get anything. I'm sure there's a few people furiously typing on Discord that knows better than I do. If you do, I'll look at it after this presentation. Let me know. I tried asking ChatGPT and got some monstrosity that looked like a bunch of MBA grad star doing acid and then getting out crayons. It's a mess. And it was no help at all. So I thought, well, I'm not getting any help here. I might make my own. So I came up with this kind of way of diagramming authentication requirements. So this is kind of a logic diagram, right? You've got and is just the junction there. I put an O or a little circle there for something that's optional, like an MFA token, and or from logic diagrams. You need a password or access to a registered email, where access to a registered email can be used for a forgotten password account. And so we can start asking ourselves this list of questions again for each of the authentication factors. So, okay, for instance, take username. How and when is the username provided? How is it defined by the user, and how will it be provided to someone who asks? Maybe you require them to say, okay, I am this person, give the name over the help desk thing, or maybe say, could you please give me the username for this email address? Maybe, I mean, that might not be what it should be, but maybe when you call in to help desk, that's actually what it is. What about access to registered email? How can it be changed? Well, maybe if I go into the branch of a gym, maybe just ask nicely. Like maybe that's enough. Maybe I can just go into the help desk and they don't actually require any authentication because they don't know that this is an authentication factor. But what about MFA token? So MFA token, this happens all the time. Like, what if an MFA token is lost or it's stolen? What if they have a new phone or and they lose all of the Google Authenticator tokens on their previous phone? What happens? Maybe they have like an alternate channel which ends up being access to registered email. And I find digging into this happens quite often, that access to registered email gets you access to an account, like it might be a personal email, gets you access to the account no matter what it is. So if you get access to someone's email, then you get access to all of their stuff, all of their accounts. And then there's another thing to think about. Are there alternate comms channels? So for instance, like what I showed there before is access to over online on an internet website. So what about help desk? What about like, do you have some kind of thing to call in? Do you have a voice profile, or do you have a voice pin or a telephone pin or something like that? All of this is part of the authentication factors to getting access to a user account. So I tried using these diagrams to follow these things up. And once you follow these things up, it can show a bit of complexity, like what you do when it's online, how do you get access to a username, especially through an alternate channel or an MFA token, for help desk over the phone or in person. Even once you're authenticated, do you get JSON tokens and JSON refresh tokens? And should that be part of this diagram? Because they can be disclosed as well. Now, this is just me in a short and sweet presentation, effectively making up my own thing. I haven't been able to find someone who's actually been doing this and documenting what is required to authenticate to an account in a visual way. I showed this to a couple of people at in my work, and Finn, one of my colleagues, gave this as he didn't like the or and or whatnot, and just wanted to use words there. Yeah, that might be some way to do. I like my symbols, most because I'm used to logic diagrams, probably too used to them, but maybe this kind of thing. But ultimately, I thought as a takeaway, it's worth knowing what is used to authenticate, not just how to authenticate. And it's worth following that down, both to see how it cascades down. So for each of these authentication factors, what can you use to get, replace, what happens if that authentication factor is lost or stolen, can't be substituted, transferred, whatnot. It's worth writing down a few reasons. Firstly, to see some holes. You might find that all of these authentication factors, even with multi-factor authentication, that they can cascade into a single source. For instance, access to a user's email, which can then potentially be changed because they don't know the multi-factor, sorry, they don't know the authentication factors throughout the organization. And the other reason why it's worth writing down is for communication. Help desk, for instance, all the branches, whatnot, if you're going in person or you call up, should know these requirements, should know what they should expect to have someone authenticate to their account. And then, of course, these questions are perfectly valid, even just for adding something else to authenticate. Like, for instance, if someone dies, but they might need access to their accounts, you need to have some process to do that. I'm not going to go into that. That's part of IDP and that kind of thing. But all these questions should be asked for each of the factors of authentication and see if you can go down the rabbit hole. I'm probably going to have a write-up on this on the Volcus blog. It's not up there yet. Sorry, I've written it up, but all this stuff needs to be QA'd and whatnot, and I'll have someone look through it. But hopefully next week. But I said that in a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and I still haven't put up the blog post for that yet. So maybe in a couple of weeks it'll be up. If you have any questions or anything like that, then I'll come down to Discord soon and check it out.
No, that was awesome. Thanks, Matt. I think it's fascinating because the end result, I would assume in some cases, is basically you only need access to an email account. And just like tracing everything back to, I just need access to a single email account. And then it's like, how do I change that email account? If they got in store. Sorry, my loyalty card isn't working. Can you change my thing? Or, all those kind of things. So it's quite interesting in the context of Matt's threat modeling tool, the other Matt's threat modeling tool, like in terms of modeling the vulnerabilities in your system. Like, do I actually have 2FA or is it like single FA in the end?
Yeah, and I find, especially when you go into the practicalities of these things, because a lot of this, even doing threat modeling, we kind of look at the theoretical side of it, how things should work. But then if you're getting to the practical side of what happens if, like the extreme example, what happens if someone dies? How do their family get access to their account? Is there a process for that? And then putting on your red team kind of hat, because I know even in red teams, we do focus a lot on passwords. We focus a lot on passwords and phishing to get passwords, going in and using stuff like dhash to get passwords, and our bypass and multi-factor authentication might go for that. But when you take the entire organization and an account in an organization as being a kind of an entity of that organization, not an entity of an application, but an entity of an organization, and take into account their help desk and their in-person stuff, sometimes authenticating can be a bit more interesting than you expect. And there could be a few different ways around it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for talking. I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in the blog write-up, so we'll just make sure somebody abuses you enough to make sure you do it. It's now caused an interesting discussion about the difference between engineers who understand logic gates and developers who don't understand logic gates. Because I had this argument with someone recently about the difference between developers and engineers, and I'm not getting into that one again.
That's a problem. I go from a development background, and anyone who sees an OR gate will be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's just black magic to me.
It's how the computer works.
Yeah, maybe just go back to literally and or. Yes. I don't know. The only problem is sometimes symbols are really good for just doing larger diagrams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agree. Thank you very much, Matt. It's always great having
Sure.
you, and we will see you soon.
Thanks.